You're like a pro, Joff. You're just like blowing our minds here. You're like a pro.
It's not that difficult.
I'm now picturing that actually you've got about 4 screens going on up here, and you're like, doing all this. Have you got filters? Have you got filters on us? Have you taken 10 years off us as well? Are you kind of,
I can do that.
Yeah, full head of hair.
That would be hilarious, wouldn't it? That would be wonderful.
I do feel like I've got too much hair sitting here in between the two of you.
Now that's boasting. That is. I feel I've got too much. What am I to do with it all?
Well, welcome everyone to this SEBAcast with Alex Harris and Ruth Rice. Absolutely delighted to chat to them over the next few minutes because they're going to be our speakers at the SEBA's Ministers and Leaders Conference in March the 5th to March the 7th. So thank you, Ruth, and thank you, Alex. How are you doing, Ruth? Are you well?
Yeah, good. Looking forward to that. That's going to be great, isn't it?
Great.
Ashburnham. That's Ashburnham's top place to go for a jolly. Lovely.
It is. It's a beautiful place. Have you ever been there, Alex?
No, I haven't. No. But I am now looking forward to it. So, I was looking forward to it before, obviously. Now even more looking forward to it.
Yeah, walking around the lake, lovely food. Oh, what's not to like, Ashburnham?
It is a beautiful, beautiful place to come. So it'd be good to see you both there, and we're looking forward to it. We just wanted to introduce you a little bit to folk, because if they don't know who you are, it's just nice to hear a little bit from our speakers before they get there. So Ruth, tell us a little bit about yourself, tell us a little bit about your family, but also what would be good to hear is what you do. And I think you've written a couple of books as well.
Yeah, I'm shamelessly promoting one behind me, but it's just because this banner behind me hides all the rubbish. So yes, I'm up in Nottingham here. I live with my husband Mark, and we've 3 grown-up children. We've just become grandparents, which is lovely. I've got a little dog, Bo. She's under the table, being quiet at the moment. So I set up a number of years ago when I was in pastoral ministry here in Nottingham, a little place called Renew 37, which was in response to my own breakdown, really, and I needed something that didn't exist. And so it's a place where you can show up and be present and do some stuff that's good for your well-being, where prayer is absolutely key, and where we partner with mental health services. And that kind of took off, and had to give up the day job a few years ago to see what that could look like, giving that away to other churches who were interested. And so we've got about 270 centres now nationally, and we've just gone international. Accidentally set some up in Melbourne whilst I wasn't looking.
Accidentally?
Yeah, no, it just kind of happened with this. It's like growing weeds. God seems to be all over this. He cares deeply about the mental and emotional state of not just the nation, but his church, and something's happening.
And Alex, you're up in the north as well.
Yeah, up in Leeds, up in the mighty city of Leeds. Yeah, I guess my backstory is I grew up in a fabulous family, but it wasn't a Christian family at all. So I had a very distinct experience of Jesus in my 20s. Like, I wouldn't have been able to tell you anything about Jesus' story, wouldn't have been able to cite anything from the Bible, and sort of out the blue over 3 months just became infatuated with Jesus. And really ever since then, so for the last 20 years, I guess I've just felt this compulsion to help other people meet Jesus for the very first time, and to start the kind of Christian communities, what we call churches, which will really flourish authentically in the place where people live. And so about 2 years ago, the YBA, the Yorkshire Baptist Association, super kindly asked if I would basically come and do those 2 things in the association. So I have a grand title as a regional minister, which I always feel a massive imposter syndrome around, but focused entirely on what's called pioneering and church planting. That's the language in YBA. So distinctly set apart to focus all my attention on that, which to my understanding is helping people who don't yet know Jesus, and have that clear and persuasive invitation, and establishing churches, Christian communities, authentic to who they are and where they are, so they can flourish in those kind of places. So yes, I'm a regional minister. Also, wonderfully, a place called St Hills Theological College. They asked if I'd help co-lead a new centre for church planting. So I'm about 2 years into that. That's really exciting. That's actually within our Baptist world and beyond our Baptist world. So that's really, really exciting. We're planting a new church. We call it a collaboration of micro churches here in the centre of Leeds. So we adapted an old school and have some interns living with us, and are planting a number of kind of churches within the house as such, and other local spaces. And then I also, some folk in our Baptist world would be part of what's called the Fire Starter Network. So that's a couple of hundred of our Baptist churches have engaged with that. And that's really stories of growing churches, super ordinary churches that experience growth through people coming to know Jesus.
And so, Alex, I believe you're doing a PhD.
So yeah, professional doctorate. So the cohort is church planting in post-Christendom Europe. And the particular piece of research I'm doing on is the capacity for churches and Christians to imagine themselves being used by God to start a new Christian community.
But Ruth, I mentioned you had written a couple of books. I know you've got a book just coming out, but you've written another book, which I always get the title wrong. So
it sounds like it's called Shut Up and Pray, doesn't it?
That's what I want to call it.
Slow down, show up and pray, not shut up and
right.
pray, which is what everybody calls it. And then there was the A to Z of well-being. And the one that's about to come out that I'm actually quite excited about, whilst Alex is talking, I'm like, oh, I can't wait to have some big discussions with you about this, because I mean, honestly, yeah, this concept of well-being as the gospel, this is the gospel, and people are already looking for this. So if we're wanting a connection between the world in which we are being placed to bring the gospel and our own lives, this concept of well-being, I don't think there's a better one personally. Right now, anyway, in the UK, we've got a lot of people really struggling with their well-being, whatever they think that means. The language they're using is the language that the local church has been digging into for ages. So I talk about these 5 ways to well-being that mental health services use, which I think the church already engage in. And I don't think it's just about doing stuff for your mental health. I think it's about that deeper inner life. So I do think this is probably about church planting and church growth. But I think deeper than that, this is about the church placing itself within the community that God's put it in and living authentically something that other people want to be part of, which is pretty much what Jesus started anyway. But it's that, I suppose my concern as a pioneer myself back in the day was I was setting up things that were exhausting me and I don't think were sustainable, and then inviting people to follow me into unsustainable living and giving. And then wondering why people didn't want the gospel that seemed like good news to me, but it didn't look like good news in my life. It looked like an exhausting set of rotors. So the way in which we're not just trying to plant what we've already had, but to see something coming out of our lives that are full of God's shalom, that fascinates me. And I think, therefore, any association or any church looking to do something missional, go, well, start with prayer. Prayer is pretty much the most missional thing I've ever been involved in. So I want to talk about that a bit with folk who are interested, because I don't think we pray for mission. I think prayer is mission. I think the missional heart of God is calling people to talk to him and be with him. And as they do that, we're seeing people come to faith in their droves.
Listening to you speak, it's really interesting to me. So one of the things I think I've noticed, so the gospel is this beautiful diamond, isn't it? The gospel's a beautiful jewel, and it seems to me in different places or at different times, a different facet of the jewel is most easy for people to look in and see Jesus through. Does that make sense? So there was a time, or there is still a time, but there's certain places where talking about Jesus' offer of forgiveness is the aspect of the gospel that people most easily engage in, or on and on we go. What I've observed, really interesting, is in a younger generation, so I'm mostly seeing God reach young adults, is the concept of Sabbath and rhythm of life, and Jesus being the most well-being, like the human being who is most well, and therefore, and therefore his invitation to mimic his life. Like that seems to be the facet of the gospel that I most see young adults engage with and being drawn to Jesus through, and then they meet the rest of the gospel from that point. Does that make sense? They meet forgiveness, and they meet cleansing, and they meet expiation, and they meet propitiation, and whatever long the words you want to use. But what deeply and profoundly attracts them is there is a way of living as a human being where I can be well. And who is the most well-being I know? It's this man Jesus. And it's particularly that concept of Sabbath I find this idea of, to borrow Mark Comer rather, what's his words? It's delight, stop, rest and worship. I find those words profoundly attractive to folk who aren't yet Christians, particularly young adults. They want to experience those words, even if they're not quite sure what that looks like or what that
thing around the concept of well-being is I'd be saying it isn't about being well, and the beauty of the way of the cross, which is not everything's jolly and it works out fine in the end, or this is a self-help movement where we're all going to be fine, is there's space within God's shalom for all of your life, for your joy and your sorrow, for you not to be okay. So that whole okay not to be okay thing, I believe, is at the very heart of the gospel, because when I wasn't well was when I had the most well-being. And it's really interesting that until that point I had a very busy life sorting out people and trying to get them saved and get them into a kingdom of my own making, which was exhausting. So I think there's something about us, as well as working out how to plant church, how to see the gospel spread, is what actually is the gospel. What does it look like in your life? What is that? What do you mean by well-being? What is shalom? What is the gospel? So the deeper you go into this, the deeper the well.
What I really value, I think, just about the posture of this, none of it was rehearsed, was it? It's just natural to come out. But what I really value about the posture and just listening into this is, I think this is about everyone, everywhere, in every way, just being used by God to invite other people to experience God, to come to know him, to trust him in Jesus, to establish what is a new, or could be a new community. Like it's not reserved for some elite people who have to have it all together or be amazingly gifted. It's actually something that everyone, everywhere, in every way, in every daily life, can go about and be these kind of people. And I really value that. I think that is something that is important for us to figure out and embrace. And actually, as ministers, because I guess it's ministers and leaders at this conference, isn't it? It's how we live that, how we are that, but how then we create a culture and a posture in our churches or in the things we're responsible for, where everyone else is allowed to be that. It's Ephesians 6, isn't it? Prepare the saints for works of service. So, how do you create that sense of culture and engagement of everyone in being able to do whatever language you prefer, church planting, pioneering, evangelist, participating in God's mission, whatever our favoured language is, but it's everyone who gets to play. Yeah.
I think culture and language does matter, and I think it's culture and language that God is shifting around us. And I think it's some of that we can explore together at conference and go, I think the culture that's being created, that's what the next book's about, and it's quite exciting. The next book's going to be a bit challenging. I don't think everyone will like the next one, but it is this, here's 5 culture shifts that the church may need to engage in, and the language we use may well be one of those to engage with. Oh, I'd like this. You should just maybe just sit Alex and I up on a platform, like the touch paper, and retire, really. I think it'd be I don't know if we're putting people
What are you trying to say?
Joth might be regretting his decision, Ruth.
Yeah, I just love the blend of this conversation, because actually I think it's the conversation that we need to have. And I'm sitting here thinking, because we've got so many conversations going on in our Baptist family, particularly at this moment in time, but this one seems to spark, a flame that people are desperately wanting to say, how do we do mission well? How do we share the gospel of Jesus Christ well? What does that look like? What does that look like in our context? And how can we do that holistically? And that's what that's what I want the conference to be about. Not to be prescriptive, to say, okay, here is the 9 best ways to be missional in 2024, but to actually go away thinking, I need to prayerfully grapple with this with God and allow God to work this through in our different contexts. So I think the blend of you coming together at a conference is, for me, is going to be really exciting.
What you decided to do, Joth, is very unusual, because normally I don't know about you, Alex, I get invited to speak alongside other contemplatives, or we're going to mostly do prayer. You've invited 2 people who we absolutely respect and admire each other's work, but we're actually coming from slightly different angles and saying this is that, it's the same thing. And I think that kind of idea of the sort of scissors of the 2 cutting edges, I think this could be quite fun, which is why I hope you the same with me, Alex. We will just say what we're thinking, I
think that's really important. I think the conversational aspect that Joth has just identified, and which is going back and forth between you, Ruth, you and I, is really important. I think also I'd expand it a little bit, and I think I'm astutely aware that it'll be a room full of experts. Does that make sense? Ministers and leaders, these guys know what they're doing. There's a very real sense. I'm super aware. I'm sure I'm speaking for Ruth, you as well. Super aware that almost anyone else in the room could be on the platform. And so one of the postures I'm super keen that we hold is not just a conversational space between you and I, Ruth, if that makes sense, but somehow in the room that we're, there isn't a platform, for want of a turn of phrase, in terms of an elevated space and a lower space. I mean, there might be, because you need to see who's talking, but how do we actually leverage the wisdom in the room? And I think, Joff, that's what I'm hearing you say when you're talking about not wanting to come with here's the 9 points of a perfect church, or here's the 7 ways to make Jesus come back tomorrow, or whatever it might be, but actually to say, here's some thoughts, here's some reflections. And both Ruth and I, I'm certain, we're going to be picking up the Bible, and trying to say, look, let's look here, let's together look here, and now let's together work it out there. Let's together look here, and then let's together work it out there. And I think in some of our preamble, Ruth, I heard you say, which I couldn't affirm more, that going to conferences, either as a contributor or a participant, and how many of us have gone to those conferences and then nothing happens. We hear from God and there's wonderful stuff, and then life overtakes us and nothing materializes. And I think all of us, aren't we, we're leaning to say, like, how do we make this move out into the everyday life? How does this change you as a leader, as a minister, the people you serve, in the way that you see and discern is right, that you're changed and you become more that Jesus might want you to be, or how he might want you to be in that. I hope that makes sense. It was a bit rambling.
And it's great too, because I think you're right. Saying we do want to harness the wisdom in the room, but we've also been to those terrible ones where the speaker from the front says nothing, and then you all have to sit around with a flip chart and 2 pens. And it also won't be that. I think both of us do have stories to tell and things that we're passionate about, and bits of the Bible that have gone so deep in us that we can't not talk about them. So I think that will happen. But yeah, I really agree with you, Alex. I think one of my culture shifts I'd love to see is every platform taken away. So everybody meeting in the round always, round a table or whatever. I mean, I know that's not possible, but I think that would do away with quite a lot of the problems that we face of unreal lives leading people into unreal situations. So I think it'd be great to see, a good mix of both. I don't think I have spoken at something that's making me kind of rub my hands together like this quite as much, because I get people saying to me, "Oh, well, we're not going to do renewal wellbeing because we're evangelistic and we want to preach the gospel," and it makes me want to tear my hair out, because I want to go, this is the gospel. This is sharing. We don't get to choose. Shall we be contemplative or charismatic? Shall we be evangelistic or look after our well-being? This is that. And so to be able to sit in a room with people who really care about mission and church planting and say, well, have you thought about your inner life, and do you have some habits of well-being, and how are you sharing those? That will be a rich conversation, not to divorce one from the other, but to put them both together. Cutting edges.
It would just be great to have a little bit about who you are. So let's do some quick fire kind of questions. So the first question is what's your favourite takeaway and why?
Favorite takeaway, probably Indian, just because we got a fantastic Indian around the corner. Love it.
Alex?
Oh, for me, well, I can tell you exactly. So there's a Japanese place just up the road called Tada, which is absolutely amazing. We like that. One, I love the name, Tada. But two, it's absolutely brilliant Japanese. So that might lead the way. Or Mythos is a kind of Greek Cypriot place. One of the things I delight about where we live, it is incredibly multicultural. So everything is cooked very authentically. So yeah, they'd be leading takeaways.
So Ruth, when you get some downtime and you could do anything you wanted to do, what's the one thing you would choose to go and do?
I'm going to say watching Netflix, right?
Yeah, go on, say it. You said it.
Let's pretend I love to. No, I mean, there's loads of stuff. If I'm being really honest, recently I've got socially quite lazy, but I do watch a bit of Netflix. I love to read. I've got a dog. I like to go walks with the dog. I am really, though, a coastal person, but I live in Nottingham. But I'm born in the Isle of Man, and I love to sea swim. Sea swimming's that's when I'm most alive. But you can imagine I don't get to do loads of that when I'm here. And a lake doesn't do it.
I'm going to say Ashburnham. You could lake swim.
That, but lakes are just not the same as the sea. So, as we know, that.
Alex?
People and being outdoors and physical. So any combination of those. So I've got 4 younger children. Most of them love the physical side. I do as well. So downtime would be taekwondo with the 9-year-old. Weight training, we've got a little weights gym and punch bag and stuff that hangs out in the back garden. That's with the 13-year-old. The 12-year-old loves to do park runs. So every Saturday morning we're out at the park run. So that kind of stuff is ideal for me.
The last question, and I mean, let's see if we could keep this short. Although in some ways you've already touched on this, but my last question was going to be, what brings you joy? Ruth, what brings you joy?
Oh, my family.
Yeah.
I find that hard because I know Renew is based on the fact there's so many people I'm meeting who don't have anybody. And so to talk about it, but oh my gosh, I'll tell you what brings me the most joy at the moment is my little 20-month-old granddaughter who I have every Wednesday. And on a Wednesday, I switch off everything else that I'm doing and we crawl around the floor and we make stuff. And the joy in that, oh, I love it. So yeah, my kids and all their mess, yeah, brings me lots of joy.
And Renew Wellbeing, to some extent, is sharing of that family, isn't it?
And that the joy of that. So I open a prayer room every morning at 9:00 and people from all over the country just come and pray morning prayer with me, and that's family. And so as much as blood family is family, I do delight in family still. I just like to be able to switch the screen off afterwards.
What about you, Alex?
I think genuinely I would have dozens of answers. I guess all of us would. What instinctively surfaced as you asked that question was the verse in Ephesians 4 where it says, "Awake, O sleeper, and rise from the dead, and Christ will shine on you." And I think seeing that occur in someone's life, when they experience Jesus, walking off the pages of the Bible, and they feel that, "Awake, O sleeper, and rise from the dead, and Christ will shine on you." That spiritual resurrection, which is the most powerful work of God in the world. I think seeing that happen in people's lives. That's what came to the surface, Joff. Ask me tomorrow, it might be something else, but that's what...
I'm going to say the same as Alex now, otherwise they'll think... Yeah, no, not crawling around the floor, that.
And I'm sitting here going, I would have said a good glass of red wine. That's where my spirituality's at. Listen, guys, that I'm not going to ask you any more questions because we've run out of time. But it's been great, and I'm really looking forward to you being together, us being together, and also our ministers being with you as well, and the blend of all that conversation, thinking, looking at God's word together, worshipping together, but also grappling with what does it look like to be holistic in our mission in the context of which we find ourselves? What are the cutting edges of mission today, so that we can be effective in God's kingdom, or he can be effective through us in God's kingdom. So it's going to be a lot of fun, I'm sure. So thank you so much for your time, and thank you everyone for listening in and watching, and we look forward to seeing you at our conference. If you're not booked in yet, get yourself booked in, and it'd be great to see you there. Bless you. See you soon.
Nice to see you.